Good morning and welcome to the COVID-19 Emergency Rental Assistance Forum. Today is March 30th, 2021. My name is Aubrey Albrecht. I am the Vice President of Education and Chief Innovation Officer at Minnesota Multi-Housing Association. I'm happy to turn it over now to Todd Liljenquist from MHA's office. He is going to give us an update on where we are now. Todd.
Great, thanks, Aubrey. Hi, everyone. My name is Todd Liljenquist. I am the Vice President of Government Affairs and Chief Operating Officer at MHA. I want to thank all of you for attending today, and thank you to the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency for providing us the opportunity to host this meeting for the industry. Before we jump into the presentation, wanted to provide a quick background for our members and other attendees. We've seen a significant rental market support during COVID-19. Last year, the agency administered CARES Act funds of $100 million through the COVID Housing Assistance Program. And in the past several months, the federal government has passed additional rental assistance, which Minnesota will receive $375 million from the Consolidated Appropriations Act and an additional $200 million expected from the America Rescue Plan. This money is important to housing stability. We continue to hear movement at the Capitol working on an off-ramp of the eviction and lease termination moratorium. With rental assistance available and expected to be efficiently distributed, we are hopeful we can begin to move back toward a normal market in the coming weeks and months. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and will be made available on the MHA YouTube page. After the presentation, if time allows, we will move to questions. So again, if you have questions, please submit them via the question function on the side. Now, let me introduce our speakers today. Rachel Robinson serves as Deputy Commissioner for the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency, where every year more than $1 billion is put to work to address homelessness, increase homeownership, and create and preserve affordable rental housing. Prior to her role at the agency, Rachel was the head of the NOAA Impact Fund of the Greater Minnesota Housing Fund. Her background also includes housing development and asset management for arts space projects, common bond communities, and as a consultant for J.L. Pope Associates. Rachel is joined by Matthew Urchel, who will be providing information as needed during today's webinar. Matthew is Managing Director with Witt O'Brien's out of Washington, D.C. Matthew is a foremost expert in a wide variety of HUD-funded programs, and he has critical experience working with FEMA's public assistance and mitigation programs. Prior to joining Witt O'Brien's, Matthew served as the Director of Research and Strategic Analysis for the State of New York's Superstorm Sandy recovery. With that, I will turn over the presentation to Rachel.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having me here today. This is great. We have a pretty generic presentation in terms of what's on the screen, but I will pause and take some moments as we go through the slides to talk a bit to you, the audience that is really important to us, who provide housing as landlords in Minnesota, because we know that you are important partners in making sure this program works well and that your renters find out about and get access to this assistance. And all the inner workings of a program of this size are important for you to understand as we are crashing toward our opening day, which is coming very soon. I know everyone is really eager to get more information about how it works, but more importantly, when, and we will get to the when. It is very soon. We are really at a place now where we understand the program rules. The federal government has not made a lot of, earth-shaking changes lately, and we will be able to really talk about what we know is required, what we know is happening, and it'll come together pretty quickly. So if we could go to the next slide, I'll get into the boring stuff, but it is important. And the boring stuff includes that this has been the COVID-19 Emergency Rental Assistance Program, and that name and any acronym that you might make from it, we can set aside. We have determined that especially for the public and in the marketing that we're going to do, we have a brand. We'll be revealing that. We have a 5 o'clock webinar tonight and a 2 o'clock today that folks can register for on our website or watch later. in video format when they are released as videos, but we'll be talking really to the renter community and landlords and the public at large, including policymakers, about the brand, which is Rent Help MN, to make it so people can find the website based on the brand and use a short phrase that ties it back to rent assistance so that people aren't trying to find COVID-19 emergency rental assistance. It's a little challenging to Google. So the program is for renters. I think we're talking to landlords, so hopefully that isn't as surprising as it is in some settings where homeowners are not covered. But this program, we're not open for applications yet, but we will be in the coming weeks, feeling very good about our timelines at this point. So we are moving toward that opening day. And the funds last year in 2020, Minnesota Housing put together the COVID Housing Assistance Program from General CARES Act funds, or the coronavirus relief funds. And so those were funds that came in through the state, were made available to Minnesota Housing, and we wrote the rules with just a little bit of guardrail stuff from the federal government. But the bill that passed in December is much more specific. It is an emergency rental assistance bill. Treasury has a website where you can find the bill language, all the guidance they've put out. It's pretty dense, but if you just Google Treasury emergency rental assistance, you'll find that landing page and can see what they directionally have told us to do, but then have given states and other grantees, as they call us, a little bit of flexibility in how we put together our program, and certainly no resources on exactly how it gets done. So Minnesota is with 5 local counties and 2 local cities collaborating to decide what the program looks like and to put something out to the public of this size that is everything from asking for private information to making payments. It was hard last year with the CHAP program, the COVID Housing Assistance Program, and it's even more challenging this year with federal rules wrapped around it, but we again are working really toward a good place in terms of our launch. So those numbers that you just heard previously from Todd are correct. So Minnesota received, it's in the bank, $375 million. In the last program, of that, $290 million is actually in the state's account, and about $85 million came right off the top to the 7 local jurisdictions. And in the next American Rescue Plan that was passed in March, the bill language is slightly different in terms of how the allocations will work. And we've not seen a calculation of the state's total, but it will work similarly where the state will receive a total. The local governments will have the ability to take those grants right off the top. And then the remainder will be with Minnesota Housing for us to administer as rental assistance. Tribal nations, 9 of the tribal nations in Minnesota did receive direct allocations to provide emergency rental assistance. We are not running the program together with the tribal nations, but we are collaborating and communicating. Each of them has the opportunity to decide if enrolled members or enrolled members' descendants, relatives, others living on tribal lands, or enrolled members off tribal lands have access. But there is a chance that if you have a tenant who is an enrolled member of a Minnesota tribe, that their tribe may be able to assist them in the city. They have that flexibility, and they're all deciding independently what they want to do. So the funding is available until September 30, 2022, but I'll say Minnesota Housing plans to get the assistance out in the community and fast. And so our plan is not to hold on to the funds, but to really get it into the hands of those who need it and need it now. So the timelines are interesting, but they're not really driving our program design at this time. So on the next slide, talk a little bit about eligibility. And this is coming straight from the federal rules. So of course, the eligible recipient of funds, and this is where we should target to you as landlords, is the household. And that's in the bill language, and that's in how we've designed the program. We'll talk later about how you can partner with households, but the household is the eligible entity because the household needs to have income documentation to demonstrate their income is below 80% of area median income. So if you've ever worked with affordable, That's going to be higher than any affordable program, higher than a measure of poverty or the measures we used for the COVID housing assistance program, but is still a moderate income. And so a family of 4, it's somewhere around 70,000 in the metro, and in greater Minnesota in the mid 50s for a family of 4. The households need to show that they've experienced a financial hardship through the coronavirus outbreak, and that they face housing instability because of the coronavirus outbreak. If a household is coming for us with assistance with paying their back rent to avoid losing their housing, it's pretty easy for them to demonstrate they meet these criteria. I wouldn't stress these, as in I wouldn't worry about demonstrating these criteria for households who are low income and haven't been able to pay rent, have had any sort of shocks throughout the COVID-19 pandemic to their income. That's who we're targeting, and they should easily be able to get through the application and show that they've been impacted. There's been a lot of talk in other states, programs nationally, locally, about landlords applying. If you read the bill, it says a landlord can initiate the application with the participation of the tenant. But the bill and the Treasury guidance also say the household has to provide private information around their income and sign the application. Treasury uses the word attestation 13 times in their guidance related to what tenants need to demonstrate in showing eligibility. So we essentially have a compliance program, and Minnesota Housing and our partners at with O'Brien's, and Matthew Urchel's here just to support me on this, because we have brought in a big powerhouse consultancy to help us run the program and make sure that we have a lot more efficiencies in the business of doing a program of this size. But landlords can initiate an application. They can help a household put in an application. They can help a household find all the resources that they need to get through the application, but the renter is the applicant. And so it's just really important we keep that in mind as I talk about other program elements. The households are eligible for us. This is from the bill. It's currently up to 15 months of assistance. With the American Rescue Plan, that extends to 18 months. We have to do compliance on which bucket of funds pays which months. That's not the tenant's problem to figure out. But we look back. Minnesota has decided not to cap assistance based on any measure, but to meet people where they are at. We will look for reasonableness in requests for assistance and reserve the right to double check the numbers. But we're really looking to bring people current and then get them on a stable footing going forward. So that 15 months is if someone has not been able to pay since the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic, or their April 1st rent, all the way back, so it's mid-March, so it'd really be April 1st rent, all the way through to today. They could, by the time they apply, already be at 13 months of need. And so we would want them to apply for all 13 months of need. And but then their clock has run 13 months. And so with the extension in the American Rescue Plan, they would only have a few months remaining, 5 months remaining on that total clock. That's from the federal rules. It's really to tie this back to that sense of emergency rental assistance and not long-term. But one of the other great things about the bill is that we are able to do future payments of rent 3 months at a time. And that is assistance up to the total rent obligation of the household. They need to request it, they need to ask for it. In some of the materials that will be coming out later today, we have a landlords get ready document, and we want to make sure you help your tenants understand they should ask for that 3 months of future assistance when they're eligible. So we will first be focused on households who are behind on rent. When we open for applications, we're inviting people who are behind to apply. If they apply, we want to catch them up on their full arrears that are within the coronavirus timeframe, so back to March of 2020. We can't go before that, that's the rules, but catch them up and do 3 months forward, so that household is able to be stabilized both in catching up and some rent assistance for the next few months to keep them in place. We do have the ability to cover manufactured home park lot rent, or if the home itself is rented, we can cover that as well. Treasury has made that clear that those are rental costs. Let's see the next slide. So I mentioned this, so I won't spend too much time here, but this is, again, we will start with tenants who are behind on rent. So when we open, that is one gate or criteria that we are setting up that is separate from what's in the federal bill. We are not really focused, if you've gotten really into the policy behind these bills, there is a requirement that we focus some prioritization on households who've experienced unemployment and or are 50% of area median income or below. That doesn't really drive our decisions because we know going into this that those households will be overrepresented in the pool of applicants. So we'll be tracking, we'll be measuring, and if at any point we're concerned we're not reaching those households, we would focus on outreach and we would focus on finding and getting those households access rather than shutting the program to others who don't meet those criteria. So payments go, I'll back up 1 second, Aubrey, sorry. The payments do go to landlords. So this is where you do have a big role. The IRS did issue a letter. I'll have to get that up online, but the funds are expected to go to the landlord and the landlord accept the funds. If you don't respond or don't choose to participate, the funds can go to the household, but then it's in the household's hands to meet that rental obligation with the funds. So we really do hope that as landlords, we can work with you, partner with you to get you set up to accept funds so that we can make that direct connection between the cost and the back rent and the actual payments that go out. All right, now the next slide, sorry about that. So the way that we have this all built, it is different from the COVID Housing Assistance Program in 2020. It's the same as in we have an online application. So we will release that website today, and when the application goes live, the application will be on the website. And the online application, we've hired a different vendor than we used last year, and we worked hard on making it as intuitive as possible while still collecting a lot of private information. But households, share information about who's in the household, income documentation, their rent obligation and their behind rent, as well as any utilities to demonstrate that they have that past due utility expense. And then they provide some form of identification and sign on. And that online application is going to work for a lot of tenants. The more support you're able to wrap around that with your tenants, and those materials are what we're really focused on today in our Get Ready launch that's later today, but is to, what do people need to have in hand to do a successful online application? Because the best application is a complete application. Once the applications are received, our team at Witt O'Brien's is the processing entity. So they are able to communicate with the community partners we've engaged who are going to help people who have a lot more barriers to assistance. They can communicate with the staff at our call center, but the Witt O'Brien's team does the file review, the compliance. So they go through each file, and if it's complete, they can move to payment relatively quickly. If it is incomplete, then they have to communicate back to the tenant, back to the landlord, try to clarify, and those steps can take many days in between. So it is a really important thing that using that online application tool is great, but an incomplete application isn't really a huge benefit to a tenant because it creates work on both sides of the transaction there. We will have a lot of wraparound support. For a lot of people, applying online isn't even an option. So maybe they can call 211 and get some resources to apply online. Maybe they can, or that's our call center. I just told you the truth, but it is 211 and they are ready today to take calls. They'll be open 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday to Saturday. And the web application is available all the time. But that call center support is there to help people whether they get stuck online or it's not working online. They don't understand a question. They don't understand what kind of income documentations work for their family. But at the point where it becomes clear that a household needs this extra assistance, we have a referral network. We call them field partners, so that 211 can get somebody to a partner who can really help them and meet their needs where they're at. We will have a paper application. It's certainly an option, especially if you are a landlord in buildings where a lot of your tenants don't have internet, wouldn't be comfortable using a computer. That might be the way to go. It's a little slower, obviously, than doing it online. And then there's uploads of documentation. I know I've mentioned this a few times, but it is a compliance file. And I think when we saw this in the bill, the first time we went, okay, that's hard. I know the business really well of Affordable. I've worked in it my whole career. And some early guidance that came out from the federal government was, I would say, more challenging than tax credit compliance. And it has been reduced now to where it's a much lighter load than a tax credit file, but still we do have to get that documentation on income. And so that's the work that we're really built to support so that people don't quit. They get in there, they get the help they need, they keep coming back for help. We contact them with that assistance so that they keep going. We have enough money to help them. And so we want them to stay in and get that assistance. So the next slide is just more on the engaging that network of field partners. This is initiated through our program. So we do hope a household goes to the call center first so that we can triage. We don't have enough case managers in the state to help every household and handhold while they fill out an application. But for those who need it, going through the call center, the 211 number, to the field partner is going to be a really important resource. And then that field partner's case managers can follow the application through and also provide the status updates in the background. It looks like my slide on landlords may not have made it in the program, so I apologize. Oh, it did, okay. It's not on the one I'm looking at my other screen. I'm sorry about that. So this slide I just threw in here, but this is really important. So I'll pause here for a moment. We can always come back if there are questions. But as businesses, as landlords, you are really important partners for us. And in order to accept payment, we do need to verify you are who you are. You say you are, that you have a W-9, and that we have a way to send the payment to you. We are getting set up for both ACH and check. ACH is going to be better, so we are hoping people are set up to use our system and get registered. Our online application system actually has a separate portal for landlords. So the landlords, you can go in, set up your accounts, set up your properties, and bring in that payment information so that we are able to process that transaction front to back and see how the information interrelates. The online system also works so that if you are a verified landlord who is registered in the landlord portal, that your business name or property name, and we're still working out some of those details, will become a drop-down menu item on the tenant side once you're verified. We know we need to do a lot more training on this. We're coming up really quickly here, but we will try to put together some sort of user guide. I've had the opportunity to play with it quite a lot, as has Matthew on the call. And coming from the owner's side before this job, I certainly know quite a bit about what you might experience. And so we do want to help and provide some wraparound assistance for you as well. Because using that online system, larger owners and managers are going to want to start talking to your staff about what model you want to use for managing your account online. So you're basically getting into a whole new payment account that relates back to your tenants. You can see if tenants in your property have applied for assistance. You can't see private information about the tenants, but you can see status on applications. So you may choose to, if you have a 50 property portfolio, have your central office handle setting up properties, setting up each W-9, business names, doing business as names, or you may choose to have that happen at the property manager level. But based on our experience with CHAP and some other programs coming out of the emergency environment of COVID-19, we'd encourage you to pick one and communicate with your staff. Will property management staff at the site be responsible for their sites or regionals, or will the central office get those accounts set up? I know you need to see the program guide, which is not or the guide on how to use this portal, which is not ready yet to maybe answer some of those questions. But even thinking about what's the best model for you, it's not going to be the same for each landlord. especially in the larger management entities. So just be thinking about that. Another great way you can help your tenants, the federal bill requires we actually collect the total rent due and the total assistance amount per month per household and report that on up to the federal government. So it's not even just proving that we're paying bills that are truly due. We need that level of detail in our system so that we can report at that level to the Treasury. So if you provide rent ledgers to households, or you can produce them itemized by month and the amount due per month, definitely get those ready, provide them to the tenants who are behind, have contact information for the landlord on there. That all helps Matthew's staff in the background match your information to the tenant's information. If we have an upload that is a letter with your business name, tax ID number, contact information, itemized past due rent and fees, that totals up, that is a great document for us to be able to move pretty quickly through an application and match it to what the tenant is requesting. Tenants will go in and request the funds. We recognize a lot of them may not understand if they've been making partial payments, how those were applied, and you're going to be a great source for getting that to be a bit more clean so that we have the accurate information when we pay a claim. And as I mentioned, the website will launch later today. We're a little bit of a race to get it out, but I've seen it and it looks great. And it has some beautiful materials, one that you can print for your tenants that tells them what they need to bring to the table to apply, and one that you can print as you on how your business can get ready to get registered and apply. So that was a lot of talking, and I'm just looking at a screen, so I don't know how folks are reacting, but I will stop there and invite our friends at MHA to rejoin or tell me if there's any questions I should be answering.
Great, thanks, Rachel. That is a lot of information, and appreciate it. There are a number of questions, some of which were submitted prior, but first question, I saw that, and I know that you answered this, but like to hear your response again. I saw that landlords can apply on behalf of tenants, but also saw tenant cooperation is required. Is there a method for landlords to apply when tenants who know they cannot be evicted have become uncooperative and refuse to communicate?
Yeah, we have been getting this question quite a lot, and we're putting more thinking around what really do we need to do to help with that situation. Because a tenant who absolutely refuses to provide income information or sign is not eligible, because we can't determine that they're eligible. So, I think we have to keep putting some thought around this, but that really comes down to that service and access component, because the tools are there to get their information in and get their signature, and we want them to get this help. If the landlord is willing to take the help and try to get this household stabilized, all of us would benefit from figuring out how to break that communication barrier and get the tenant to participate. So we have to keep putting some thought around that, and I welcome ideas on how we would do that. But yeah, the rules are the rules. We have to do the compliance, and without the tenant, we can't do it. So.
Right. If a household received assistance in 2020, that was 5 months of assistance, for example, do they only qualify for another 10 months in this program, since eligibility is limited to 15 months?
As we understand it, the use of CARES funds did not run out the clock for households on their 12, 15, 18 months, depending which bill you're looking at, total assistance in the next bill. But those 5 months where they received assistance, they can't double the assistance for the same costs in the same months.
Right.
But certainly there was some question early on of whether those months counted against the total. So we don't believe that that's the case.
Okay. And I think you answered this one as well, sort of, but I'd like to hear more details. Will there be a tutorial available for how landlords and tenants can interact with the portal?
We need to do that. And what I'm thinking is for tenants, essentially a YouTube video showing what it looks like to move through. We have a great communications staff person who does a lot of video material, and so I know it's something that I can do with him in an afternoon, is just play fictional tenant and create a video that shows what the system looks like front to back, what a document looks like that would meet the requirements. Show people taking a cell phone picture and moving it into the application of a document so that they don't need a scanner. You don't need to go to Kinko's for a lot of things, to try to help people, really make the most of that online experience. And then for landlords, we are planning to do more. It's going to be more of a manual, but just how to use the guide. Some parts of it are real. Once you are registered, it's pretty nice. You can see your properties. You can see, pending tenant applications. But getting registered and getting everything right between all the different ways that you as landlords are set up, doing business as names, property names that aren't the same as the doing business as, what would the tenant recognize, the phone number of the manager, phone number at corporate. I think we'll do some just guidance so that you have the best experience with this registration as possible.
Yeah, okay. If a resident does not currently have a balance due but expects to in the future, for example, they're a temporary employee and that has an end date on that employment, or maybe they don't qualify for unemployment benefits, it says, would they qualify to receive assistance under the new program?
They would. I'll give a couple of caveats, but the households, at first when we open, we are taking assistance for people who are behind because we want to clear the backlog and try to stabilize renters in the rental market. And we know there is backlog. And so Matthew's team has to review all those files, and we want to put them at the head of the line. So we'll be looking, we don't want to say a date yet because we don't really know how many applications we'll get. It depends how great our outreach is, how easy it is for people to achieve getting through the online application, how many hours it's taking the file review staff for each file. But once we feel good that we're clearing that backlog, we will then open applications for households who only need help with utilities or forward assistance or both. And so the system definitely works. It's the same application, but just a different level of invitation for the public. And that can be a very generous amount of assistance for households who've been impacted by COVID, or as you say, they would demonstrate that they have this hardship in temporary employment. So it definitely will be possible. Our projections show that the funds will be sufficient to take those future applications. We're just pushing them behind people who are behind so we can try to get them caught up.
All right. Will tenants with subsidies be eligible for this program?
Yes, there was a little confusion with the federal rules, but they have now been very clear. And Minnesota has made the decision, as have all of our local partners with funds, to assist households who have any kind of subsidy with the tenant paid portion of their costs, their rent, utilities, and fees. So those are eligible costs. The great thing about the industry is that the level of information collection that's already happening on a subsidized property makes it pretty easy for us to review the rent statements, so and determine that that is the amount due from the tenant. So yes, and that's been a great thing to be able to share. We know people are behind in subsidized.
Yeah, it's great. For residents that either owe money to unemployment or the IRS, are they eligible to receive housing assistance funds?
I don't know of any reason why they would be unable to receive these funds if they were eligible. When the funds come to the landlord takes them in as income, property income like rent. If the household receives the income, the check because the landlord does not participate or does not respond, the federal bill and the IRS letter make it very clear that the household does not have to pay taxes on that income, that it does not impact their benefit eligibility for federal programs or federally funded programs. We are also working at the state level to make sure we have done what we can to help those households with state taxes and any state benefits that don't include federal funds. But I don't know if those funds would then be subject to a recapture. I think that's over my head. But certainly there are these elements in place, and the funds should go to the landlord first, which should make it not a problem for any sort of potential revenue recapture type situation.
Got it. This is a rather lengthy one, but we've seen a couple of these come through. We are currently seeing residents that have a high balance of rent in arrears giving notice to vacate or moving out with the rent still in arrears. My question is, will the program allow for submissions for these past resident balances? My concern is if this is not an eligible resident due to them no longer being on the property, that the industry standard would be to send these arrears debts to a collection agency, and it talks about the long-term impacts on the resident.
Absolutely agree with the long-term impacts on the resident. Nothing about the situation for the last 12 months or the eviction moratoriums has changed that rent is due, and these balances can be very, very challenging for households to overcome if they move along. I hope that you can talk to them if they haven't left yet and they're income qualified. This assistance could be available to them. But if they do leave the housing situation, we think Treasury is looking at this question in terms of the tenant's ability to get assistance. We don't know what they will decide. We don't know what we would decide at Minnesota, so it's very premature. But it is clear that the landlord would not be able to clear that debt with this program because the funds flow to the household to the rent situation being in place. So hopefully I wasn't too obfuscating there, but I meant to say that no, if the tenant has moved out, the landlord cannot apply to this program to get that assistance. But we are concerned about what that means for tenants, and we hope they won't walk away from the potential to stay stably housed and catch up if they are eligible for this program. But the clock is ticking. It's a tough situation. So.
What is the easiest way for landlords to provide information on rental assistance to our tenants?
Great question. Later today, we will announce the website, which has downloadable pretty flyers and checklists for tenants. So that information, getting them ready is where we would hope you would focus right now, is that, it's about a page for landlords, how you can get ready, and a page for tenants. There are 4 buckets of information they need to have. And I think I've mentioned it, but some form of identification. And that list is long, but we need to know they are who they say they are. And so a piece of paper that shows that they are that person, or card, something that demonstrates that identification, is bucket 1. Income is bucket 2. If they do file taxes and they've filed for 2020, that's all they need. And often that can be pulled down online. If they are living in affordable and they've done an income qualification in the last year, you may, as a landlord, be able to show them a copy of their file and materials they gave to you. The government's being a little funny about the dates on that, but anyway, income documentation. So income documentation, find what you need to get it uploaded, and that's something landlords can just get people ready to do. And then that demonstrating they have a rent obligation, a lease. If you haven't done leases, have not been renewing, put something together that says, I'm the landlord, I own this property, this tenant lives here, and here's how much rent they are obligated to pay. Because that will show us that the rent they say they owe is the rent you believe they owe. And that's a great document for us to have. But if you don't think that they probably kept their lease, sitting in the top file cabinet, highlighted and starred, getting it to them is going to be a huge help. If you know their email or they have email, scanning and sending those documents to the household is also going to help, because then they have a file to upload rather than having to create the file with the cell phone picture or going and scanning it. And the last one is that obligation, that rent obligation, what is due. And that itemized statement I talked about, it would be a huge help to tenants. So if they have those 4 pieces of paper, they can do everything else online. You as a landlord can also sit with them and do the application together. I know it's COVID times, that may not necessarily be safe, and sit with might be a more virtual experience, but the online application is set up to work for basically a proxy or someone holding someone's hand through the process front to back. It's e-signatures, not wet signatures in the application, so tenants and landlords can partner. You know, if they understand that this is what they need to do, complete and sign and submit to get a pretty, you know, generous amount of assistance that could put them over the hump on the back rent. We hope that that's something you can share with them and get them through that application process.
Okay.
Todd and Rachel, this is Matthew. I want to hello. I want to just build on that and say that in running these programs in the past, we understand that you as landlords can be incredible champions for getting a lot of the tenants through the program and getting this assistance. Obviously, you have a vested interest in seeing that through as well. So outside of the sitting with component of that, we've also seen a lot of large property owners even, you know, get a Chromebook or a tablet and put it in an office where people can access it so that they can fill out their application. That may be something you want to explore. We obviously realize that overcoming the digital divide is going to be a key impediment to overcome and successfully administering this program. So anything that you can do to help us with that will certainly be beneficial. We too are going to work very closely with a number of these the large landlord and property owner groups to have a dedicated point of contact. So if you're working through the application process with a number of applicants, having that point of contact that we can reach out to you for any one of your tenants would be extremely helpful, so that we're not, you know, speaking with 4 or 5 or 6 different people from your agency, and we can speak to one dedicated person who has situational awareness of all the applications. So that just may be something you want to think about ahead of program launch as well.
Great, thanks. Is it possible for the program to change assistance payments to be paid monthly instead of having to wait several months?
We actually pay ahead, so pay forward of the 3 months. And certainly we've discussed, and some ideas are still on the table to slow those payments down to the payment due date, but that's complicated on our side. And so, but they are forward payments. And so they are meant to come in to pay the rent for the future months and give that assurance. I really think Congress set that up to help landlords feel more confident and tenants feel more confident that the housing situation is in place by doing 3 months at a time of forward assistance. We have asked Treasury if we have to do any other compliance on that funding per their rules and haven't heard back yet. So that may change, but our understanding is we do forward with a forward payment.
Okay. If you're a larger management company with many different owners, can we set it up so that the checks, I think it's talking about one portal entry for the management company with different ownership entities. Is that the way that the website is designed?
Yeah, I might throw this one to Matthew too, since he's on. We've both spent time learning how the system works. So Matthew, do you feel like that's a good one for you?
And I'm sorry, I cut out there. So can you repeat the question really quickly, Todd, just so I can make sure I get the right answer?
Yep, no problem. If you're a larger management company with many different owners, can we set it up so that the checks would come to our office or ACH into our office? So I think it's talking about one centralized entity, even though there are different ownership entities.
Mm-hmm. So ultimately, the payments need to go to the business to which owns the individual property, and that's because of tax reporting purposes. Now, if it is a holding company with a number of subsidiaries or a parent company, we can certainly work with you to understand the best structure. I think that is, we'll have some examples of that, hopefully not too many, but we can work with those specifically for some of the larger property management groups. I understand that many of you represent individual owners who may have LLCs and you are used to receiving payments, we do have the ability for you to act in a role as a property manager. But again, for the 1099 process of this, we want to make sure that we're reporting to the right entity. So there will be some coordination that needs to happen to make sure the payment's going to the right organization.
Great. What qualifies as appropriate income verification documentation?
Yeah, we have a sort of cascading list of options. So the best document is a 2020 tax filing assigned 1040. And we know a lot of people won't have that, but for those who do, I believe we're actually able to use the adjusted household income, and then the household is qualified. And if they continue to come back and request 3 months of forward assistance at a time, they don't need to re-qualify. And that's coming from the federal guidance. So a 1040 for 2020 means one quick review, could be the whole household under 1040, which is even easier. And then they don't need to re-qualify. That's not going to be everybody. In fact, that won't be even the vast majority. So we will then cascade through our options. So if households have a number of jobs, number of income sources between benefit programs, unemployment, wages, driving for app-based services, and receiving 1099s, W-2s, they can fill out, basically it's an online list that says, job one, how do you get paid? What document shows that payment? If it is monthly or weekly, daily income, they need to show the full 60 days that is coming from the federal government. But if they're able to bring a W-2 to show that the income for that job, but they haven't filed, we can take that on a line item. So each adult in the household, if it's a more complicated situation where you have a lot of gig work and benefits, members of the household who are unrelated or unmarried adults, we would have more information coming into that application, but those opportunities are all available. Households can bring an eligibility determination letter from the government that shows that their income is qualified. We'll put some more guidance around this as we learn more. It may not be on day one. A lot of programs have stopped doing income determinations in the coronavirus period. So the Treasury is requiring that letter be current from January 1st, 2020 and beyond. But a lot of these programs started to waive income determinations in March. So very few households have actually been means tested in the last year, even if they're on receiving programs that would definitely always be within 80% AMI, such as food stamps or SNAP, Minnesota Family, MFIP, General Assistance, LIHEAP, which is the Low Income Energy Assistance Program. So yes, we can work with those, but we have to keep thinking about how to educate and guide the community on a document from those programs, because a lot of them have not been kept current. And finally, if a household or a household member does not have income, they are able to self-certify that in the application. That is not a path of least resistance to just say, oh yeah, no income. If someone has income, they need to document it. If they don't, if someone is 18 and a half years old living in the household and they certify no income, that's not going to be a lot of compliance for us. But if they are the only adult in the household and the rent is relatively high and they can't demonstrate income, we would definitely have to spend some more time on that application, and it could result in it being rejected and declined. But that is absolutely the truth for some families, is that they have no income and no way to document income. So we are able to have them self-certify.
Okay. Is there a maximum amount payable per household? I understand the 15-month eligibility, but is there a dollar amount cap? For example, $20,000.
We have not decided, we have not created a cap. We want to meet people where they are at, and any cap would probably have exceptions and waivers. So rather than having a cap with waivers, we have a no cap with the right to review for reasonableness. So those would be situations more like if the property is a business, how do we determine what is really the rental obligation for the dwelling versus the business? If the rent is exceptionally high, what determination would we make there. But we have really chosen not to cap assistance because we know people, we're in a high rent market in the Twin Cities. Large properties, rent can be relatively high, and we don't want to have anyone miss out on this opportunity because we've artificially set a ceiling.
Okay. Will all counties in Minnesota be served through local administrators or the same website? For instance, will Olmsted County be able to use this website or service?
Yeah, great question with a few minutes. I will try to be brief, but this program is statewide, one website, one application. The federal government passed some of the funds through local governments, but there's only 7 of them in the Twin Cities. Anoka, Dakota, Hennepin, Ramsey, and Washington counties have resources directly, as well as the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. All of those entities are using the same application, the Rent Help MN application. So they can process claims from the same front door for tenants and landlords. Those entities are also potentially using their bucket of funds to have some other programmatic goals, but that doesn't override that this website is the place to go to get assistance. And once the application is submitted, that relationship to government isn't really visible to the tenant. They are in just, like any claims payment system, they're in a system that will pay a claim. And it isn't, they don't have to go to their county to get the help. They don't have to go to their city to get the count. They go to the application, the call center, the 211, or they're referred to community partners that may be on contract with the city of St. Paul, may be on contract with the state. The tenant wouldn't know the difference. And that's been a goal that we've had with the counties and cities all along the way. We don't want anyone to get confused or think they need to go here, then there. I think the vaccines are a really good example. People are a little bit on their own in some places. And so how do we make one front door? This is where you go. You don't have to go here and then here and then here and then here. One household, one application, one system to really help people all the way from front to back.
We have heard that submitting 2020 tax returns means future verifications for rent support will streamline future requests. Is that true?
That is. 2020 tax filings are the easiest, cleanest way. And I believe we even have a link on the application to file. If you get that far as an applicant, you're kind of on your own doing it yourself. You would get to that section of the application. It encourages you to file. Because if you do file, you can avoid a lot of work on our side and for the tenant, because then if they keep coming back, which they can every 3 months, as long as we have funds available, can continue to pursue forward assistance. And that means they don't have to requalify.
Okay. Will you pay charges, or will the program pay charges for fees or damages owed, or just rent?
We are working on our fees section. Reasonable fees are a housing expense, and that is a possible payment. We just need to build that out a bit more in our program guide in the next week.
Okay. This relates to the question previously asked about tenants vacating. But what if we have a resident who has applied for assistance and then vacates before the application is approved or paid out? Would the landlord still receive the payment if approved?
That is a good question, and I'm not sure I'm prepared to answer it today, kind of depending if you're talking back rent, forward rent. Certainly accepting forward rent for a tenant who's no longer in place, we would expect the funds to be returned. For the back rent component, I'm not sure I could answer that. It's almost like giving a legal opinion, because it's true. There is time between when an application comes in and when a claim is finally processed and paid. And so we would that would be a situation we'd have to work through on a one-off basis.
Okay, looks like our time is winding down. I'll see if I can get the last couple questions here. The funds received from this program and maybe previous programs or future programs, should that be reported as rent paid on the CRP forms for 2021?
That's a good question. I will put on, I can't remember if we've asked that of our other state agencies friends, but we can ask that over to the departments, commerce, et cetera, for revenue, sorry, on taxation. That's a really good question. Because there is a letter ruling federal, but not locally.
Right. And I believe for 2020, the CARES Act funds were considered emergency rental assistance funds, which per the CRP were considered rent. So
okay. I'll make sure we have a good answer to that in our FAQ.
Let's see. How about two last questions here? I'll be real quick. With the landlord portal, can we upload the lease and ledger to the resident portal? Do the two portals interact?
Remember, Matthew. Yeah, the two portals do interact, but it depends on that hypothetical.
Yeah. So unfortunately, you can actually help create an application, but once an application is started and submitted, then you would need some assistance from a processor or a case manager to be able to get the documentation in. However, the applicant can certainly get back into their application. So perhaps assisting the tenant in getting into their site and uploading that document, which I think goes back to these are the steps you can take in advance, getting them a copy of the lease, the ledger, so that they can do that.
Right. Last question. And I know that you've mentioned this before, but timeline for when you'll be starting to accept applications.
Really soon. We want our system to work well for people when it opens, and so between all the program decisions that are just winding down, getting federal guidance in the last few weeks, we want to open for a system that we want people to apply. We want them to get in there, get their applications done and complete, but we don't want it to spin, be slow, or not be as good as it's going to get. So it's coming really, really soon. We will probably be able to announce a date pretty quickly and fast. So not much more waiting. The get ready is really get ready with April's documents, like get moving on what you know now.
Great. Well, thank you. Those questions were coming fast and furious, so great job in answering them. So I'm going to hand it back over to Aubrey, but I want to thank you, Rachel, and Matthew for your time and the information that you provided.
And we thank you. We'll continue to partner with multi-housing as it's an important partnership along the way. Thanks so much.
Great. Thanks.
Yes, thank you to Rachel and Matthew, and again to Todd and MHA staff for reviewing those questions. Hopefully we got to the questions that you asked in that question box. And thanks to all of our attendees. We appreciate you taking the time to attend the forum today. And thank you for supporting MHA programs. Thanks again to the team at Minnesota Housing, and we hope to see you soon. Thanks.